I am very glad that you decided to watch this video. This video about how I recovered from depression and anxiety is a personal video that I decided to share with you because I feel like sharing our stories of our struggles is one of the best ways that we can hopefully inspire others into knowing that it's possible for them as well, into sharing hope, spreading light, and sharing the little things that honestly I never thought about or thought was worth it or thought would work when I was in my deepest, darkest struggles until I started hearing and looking for and asking other people who have also gone through extremely dark times what it is that got them through, how they overcame their personal struggle with depression and anxiety. Now, I realize there are multiple causes of depression and anxiety. As a functional medicine dietitian and as a fitness specialist who has worked with many, many clients over the last 10 years that I've been in this field, I have seen a spectrum of causes and symptoms and reasons why someone experiences depression and anxiety. And what that stems from ranges from biological shifts in their body to gut health issues to grief and loss of someone extremely close to them, of PTSD, and many, many more. So the core of the depression and anxiety may not always look the same, but what does bring us together is the symptoms and hopefully the desire to get better. So although this video is a really heavy topic, depression and anxiety are serious and painful and very difficult, I don't want this to be a video that is just pulling you down even more. I want to keep it as positive and as hopeful and as light in the terms of enjoying this conversation with each other as I can. My name is Christine Coen. I am a New York City-based functional nutrition dietitian, and I'm also a fitness specialist. And as I said before, I've worked in the industry for over 10 years, and since my own personal struggle with depression, anxiety, binge eating, and overcoming that through a few things I'm going to share with you today, my passion to help others and connect with others and hopefully inspire someone with just a little bit of hope that they can overcome this really, really difficult time in their life has become sort of my new purpose. This is something that I am so passionate about. It is what I study every single day. It is what my businesses are focused around, whether it's a fitness business or a functional nutrition business or the warrior team, which incorporates everything. I want to help people overcome this. And I believe that you can overcome this. There were so many moments I didn't want to do this work. There were so many days where I didn't think it was worth it, where my brain was telling me this is pointless. You'll never get there. You're just going to continue to take a few steps forward and a few steps back forever. This is never going to get you anywhere. But I knew in my heart I would experience some light and just a dedication to that vision and a purpose that I continued to move and go and get as much support and help as I possibly could. So these are 6 things that I put together. I kind of came up with a list of like 12 to 15 things, but to keep this video somewhat short, I'm narrowing it down to 6. I can always share the other things in a future video. Plus, I incorporate all of these into the Warrior Evolution program, and I incorporate all of these into my one-on-one coaching program. So they're all a piece of the puzzle, but I felt these were the most impactful for me. Okay, so I'm just going to jump right into it. So number one is I had to choose to believe that a positive, wholesome, happy future was possible for me. Even if that felt like the furthest thing, the deepest part of the ocean, the highest point of Mount Everest, when I was just a little ant, like looking up at this ginormous mountain, I had to choose to believe that there was a positive future for me. And that became my purpose every single day to show up in this world, was to make that a reality. This was probably like the biggest step and one of the hardest, because I had to, it wasn't just like a one day decision, like I'm going to choose hope. I'm going to choose hope and that's it. That's the end of it. Easy, said and done. I got so sick and tired of feeling so sick and tired, even though I had no idea how I was going to make this happen. Even though like my depression darkness brain, I call it like the darkness and the light, even though my depression brain was telling me almost every single second of the day, you'll never overcome this. You don't have the energy to do this. You can't do this. Who do you think you are? This is you forever. Like literally those feelings, those thoughts were in my head at all times. I still had to pull from somewhere this other thing that would give me a little bit of strength to push forward that day and do the smallest, littlest thing. But first it came from the belief. I had to stop believing that it was not possible, and I had to tell myself, this is possible. This is possible for you, Christine. You can have a happy future. You will have a happy future. You will feel happy again. You will feel laughter. You will connect with people. You will be able to be there for your friends and family. You will have healthy behaviors and love being in the moment, love being by yourself again. This was one of the hardest things that I had to do, and this list was hard. Everything on this list was a struggle and a challenge every single day to choose. And I am not trying to sugarcoat it. I'm not saying that these 6 things, do them and you got this. I am saying that every single day, this was work. And that's why I say this became my purpose. It became my purpose to find myself again. It became my purpose to rediscover my inner strength. It became my purpose to feel just even a little glimpse of lightness in my body, of hope in my body, of happiness, of pure joy. It became my purpose to have my mind clear and not racked with negativity and hating on myself and anxious about all the things that I could not control in my life, in my day. It became my purpose to focus on this very second, this very moment, and catch myself when my brain would start going into the past or start worrying about the future. It became my purpose every single day to get closer to this vision of myself that was healthy, that was depression and anxiety free, that was happy, that was grounded, that was joyous, that would wake up in the morning and not feel heavy but feel excited about the day, to have hope for my future. That became my purpose. And everything that I chose to do going forward was to fulfill this purpose. Now, like honestly, I had to choose this every single day. And I had to choose it not only in my mind, but I had to choose it with my actions. So a lot of these things that are coming up next are either actions or ways of thinking that I had to sometimes force myself to do to help get to that number one, to help that vision of myself become a reality. And full disclosure, every single moment of the day, did I do this? Absolutely not. Were there moments where, and days, and sometimes weeks where I would fall back down the stairs and, get back into a darker place? Absolutely. Depression and anxiety come in waves. And if you've ever experienced it, you'll know that there are waves where you do feel maybe not light, but you feel a little bit more capable, where you feel a little bit like the darkness has lifted a layer. And some days it lifts a little bit more. So especially on those days where I felt the darkness had lifted a little bit, I had to take advantage of when those moments came around, because I didn't know if they were going to come around again. And I had to do anything that I could during that time to help me move a few steps forward, which is a lot of what's going to come up, what I'm about to tell you. Number 2, I had to stop shaming myself for not being blank enough. This was, again, another really hard thing to do, because it seems like the nature of the depression and anxiety symptoms are to tell you that you're not enough. You don't have enough energy. You don't have enough strength. You aren't smart enough. You aren't strong enough. You aren't bright enough. You aren't talented enough. You aren't confident enough. You don't have the resources. You'll never have the resources. You'll never be able to learn this. You'll never be that way. And it's just a constant brainwash of negativity and self-doubt and self-hate and shame and guilt that is on you and put on you by your own mind day in and day out, that I just feel like that those thoughts are exhausting. I remember so many days where I just felt like I could not get away from myself. I could not get away from my own mind. And I would feel so much agitation in my body. I would feel so much just like uncomfortableness, even though I was feeling that way, even though I was having those thoughts, that it wasn't my fault, that I was not to blame. Even though I was thinking those things did not mean that they were true. They were very real, but it did not make them true. We can't really control our thoughts and our feelings even when we are in the best state of mind. Our thoughts we just have thoughts that kind of just come up, and all of a sudden when we realize, like, wow, I was thinking that. And same thing with feelings. We'll just have this overwhelmed feeling. I mean, if anyone has ever fallen for someone that they know is not good for them, is not the best choice for them, but your feeling is just so drawn to that person, you just can't choose to not feel that way. You'll have some grasp of what it feels like to feel so badly about who you are and what you are and what's happening and anything else that comes up that you are sort of failing at every single day. So I had to let myself feel those things and not shame myself for feeling them, but give myself love and compassion and empathy and just spend time with myself, like loving that part of me. And I know that maybe is a really hard thing to grasp, and it's not really a to-do, because, like, how do you do that? Some moments for me, it looked like saying out loud, I love you, to myself. It would look like me giving myself a hug. It would be comforting myself with words like, you're going to be okay. This too shall pass. You are strong. You are brave. You are loved. Different affirmations like that. And it was like one conscious part of myself was talking to this other part of myself that was experiencing the depression. Like I was comforting a friend who was experiencing this really hard, deep, dark place. And like I said before, Didn't happen every single time. It wasn't always easy to get there. Sometimes I felt stupid for doing it and I was like trying to talk myself out of doing it, but I just persisted. Okay, I'm gonna move on to number 3 because this video is gonna be 50,000 years long. Okay, this is kind of an action. Journaling. I never thought there was anything to journaling, writing, type, whatever it is. You're writing pen to paper, you're typing it out. I call it my depression brain would convince me, not worth it. Excuse me, stupid idea, not gonna work, waste of time, don't even expend the little energy that you have in doing that. I would exhaust myself just anticipating, putting so much expectation on it, whatever. Even just hating on it would be draining. But once I forced myself, and yes, I say forced myself because I really had to persist through those thoughts, which are so heavy, God, and force myself to start writing, it became such a therapy for me. For me, writing was a way for me to get all of these thoughts and emotions, which I didn't always understand, didn't always know why, didn't always have an explanation for or a reason for, and it just allowed me to get it out of my body and mind and put it somewhere else. And this type of writing was for no one else, just for me. And I purposely, because I try and edit things as I write them, or edit things as I say them, had to be an exercise in, what would you call this? I don't know who said this originally. I don't know if it was Brene Brown or someone else, but the acronym is SFD. I don't want to say it if there's kids around. First draft. Because it didn't need to be edited. It didn't need to be perfect. It didn't even need to be sentences. It didn't need to be grammatically correct. All it needed to be was me writing whatever was coming up for me, saying whatever I needed to about about saying whatever I needed to about myself, and just putting it somewhere else. Not to validate it, not to say that it's true, but to relieve my body and my brain and my soul from just carrying that around every single day, every single moment. So after writing and sort of like brain dumping and soul dumping and mind dumping, I don't know, it's a lot of dumping, there would be a little relief inside of me. And I chose to do the next right thing for me, to continue that momentum, to ride that out into the very next thing. So it became sort of like a positive trigger for me after doing it. And I made it a point to do it, number 1, first thing in the morning. So as soon as I got up, brushed my teeth and whatever, which may have taken a long time, but whenever I did get up, that was the first thing that I did. I would write out what was happening inside of me. I also made it a point to force myself to do it throughout the day whenever I felt immense feelings come up. Immense depression feelings, immense anxiety. I worked really hard to try and not let them just sit in my body and just fester and build and continue to get heavier and heavier, but instead I would break out my phone, a note section, and I would have a note section that just said thoughts. And I would put the date and I would just write. So there were so many times where I was sitting in the middle of work or on the train in New York, where I would just be voraciously just typing in a note section in my phone. I wasn't always going to have a journal with me, and it really wasn't the point, I didn't need to have it all in one particular place. I just needed to have an access to doing it. It sort of became like my new coping mechanism, or a new coping mechanism that I chose to use when I was not feeling well, because even though I was doing something, even though, yes, it was an energy expenditure, for me it felt like something I could do. I'm going to get to a few other things in a moment that sometimes were really hard for me to get to in the moment. I just felt I couldn't do it. I told myself I couldn't do it. But writing, because I could technically stay in the same spot, all I needed was to pull my phone over, which was probably in my hand anyway, or get my journal, felt like something I could do. And so I just wanted to focus on whatever I could do. Number 4, I started to pay attention to my triggers. Triggers meaning the things that cue a spiral or an anxiety thought cycle or a depressive episode. I created a list. Oh, and also my binge eating. I created a list of triggers that I could identify that seemed to make it worse, seemed to create negative momentum, and put me in a really dark place. And I wrote all of them down in, again, a note. And every day I would visit this page, and it was sort of like an Excel page. Maybe I'll put a screenshot of it here because I've actually saved it after all these years, where it had a list of all of my triggers. I think there were about 10, 12 in particular. And then next to it was a column that I would write a 1 or a 0. 1 meaning that was happening that day, I was experiencing that, and 0 meaning that was not happening. And I sort of started to realize if a certain number of these triggers accumulated within a day or 2 days, that it was most likely that I was going to binge and that my depression would take a spiral. Or I would experience anxiety. And I just started paying attention to it. Again, going back to number 2, I had to not shame myself for these feelings or that this was happening and just kind of allow it. If I could do something about it, I committed to doing something about it. Like if I could prevent another of those triggers coming into my reality, I would do that. And sometimes I just couldn't. But regardless of what happened, regardless of how, bad I ended up feeling, regardless of the triggers that I chose to do, I would not shame myself for it, but I would try and understand myself a little bit more. And again, give myself love and compassion, especially when I was sort of like coming out of it again, and not shame myself for the actions that I may have contributed to of putting myself into it. I say that with responsibility and not with self-blame, because even though it's not my fault that I am experiencing this depression, I felt it was my responsibility to help heal myself. And so, yeah, part of what I was going through where I was making choices that were putting myself into a darker place, that was making it harder for myself to overcome this and to heal. And if I did not take responsibility for those choices and I instead put the blame onto something else or felt helpless, that to me felt more disempowering and less hopeful than if I felt I could have some sort of control over what I was contributing to making this whole disease worse, this whole phase worse, this whole period worse. So I wrote a list of all my triggers and I would keep track of them. And that was a huge eye-opener for me. It was one of, I think, the most impactful things I've ever done. And it really helped bring awareness to a lot of my feelings, a lot of my thoughts and my patterns that I would get myself into, and I would sort of be able to catch myself after a while of doing this before it got out of hand, or do something to derail it and put myself onto a different thought process, I guess. It was very powerful. Number 5, I started using movement and food to heal myself. Previously, before this, I mentioned I was in the fitness industry, and exercise was to burn calories, exercise was to build muscle and get toned, exercise was to just purely for physical and aesthetics. Food was kind of the same. Food was either to just like indulge in and have something delicious and sweet. It was to keep myself from not getting fat. This is words that I would say to myself in the past. This is not something that I would say to myself now or talk to a client. This is just what was real for me in that moment. But it would to keep me from being too overweight, of gaining too much weight on the scale, of looking a certain aesthetic. So it was very much about the outside. After depression or going through depression, and I stopped caring at all about what I put into my body and about movement, I made the connection one day, it's just another story for another day, that movement helped relieve me of my negativity, of my depression by a few layers. And by sweating, by moving my body, whether it was yoga, whether it was like a high intensity class, whether it was a run, whether it was dancing or lifting weights, there was something that was shifting me even after one session, one class, one whatever, few minutes. And after I made that connection and I really felt like a shift where I felt like myself again, like the closest version of myself that I had not felt in years, I had to make a major choice that I would not care if I gained weight or how my aesthetic looked, how my outer body looked, but start moving my body and start fueling myself and seeing how that affected my mindset. So with food, for me, especially with binge eating, I would crave carbs all the time. Anything sweet, anything not sweet, just anything with carbs. And that kickstarted a binge. And then after that, I could just go back and forth between savory and sweet and savory and sweet. And I just never got full because I was trying to fill a void, an emotional void, something deeper. And I wasn't trying to fill my stomach up. So much of my trying to fix that previously was around losing weight, was around losing that 30 pounds that I'd gained out of nowhere, was to look the right way that a personal trainer should look. And it never worked. It was always full of restriction and then going over the top and binge eating. Binges would last for days. I was binging every day at one point. I remember the fear of the thought coming up with the fear that what if I'm never able to stop this? So I started to not care how it looked, how I moved my body. It didn't have to look a certain way. I didn't have to run a certain amount of miles. I didn't have to move a certain amount of minutes. But it became about moving my body to clear my mind, getting out of my head and getting into my body. Taking a few minutes to not just have these negative hate thoughts flowing through my mind and instead focus them on lifting the next weight or breathing or just getting through this next moment of this really hard physical challenge. With food, I noticed that certain foods would spiral me into depression even more, even when I was on a good note, I guess you could say, where I was doing okay for a day or two, and then I would have a binge craving and I would dive into the sweets and whatnot, and that would immediately spiral me back into another depression, which could last for days or weeks or whatever. I had to be okay with the fact that I may gain weight, but I was going to listen to what my body was really craving, and that didn't always mean food. Sometimes that meant I was bored, or I was lonely, or I was angry, or I was sad, or I was frustrated, or I just wanted to procrastinate, or I just didn't want to do something, or I felt anxious, I felt overcommitted, I felt pressured, I felt overwhelmed, I felt unloved, I felt alone. I had to go into my emotions and really acknowledge what it was I was feeling. and then see what I was craving. Was I craving a hug? Was I craving a sandwich? Was I craving a talk to my friends? Was I craving like expressing myself? Was I craving communication and connection? I had to really get real with myself. And I also had to stop putting restrictions on what I ate. In my mind, my nutrition brain was telling me all the time, don't eat this food because it's too much sugar, and don't eat that because it's not really healthy and there's not enough vitamins and minerals in this one, but you should be eating this and you should not be eating that. I had to take all of that off the table and just allow myself to eat whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted it, which is where I had to drop my fear of gaining weight came into place, because I realized like I might want cake for breakfast every single day, and if that's the case, I might gain more weight. For me, looking at the emotions at the same time as I was taking the restrictions off of what I put into my body, I mean, it was never about the food. Let's be honest. It was never about the food. It was always about what was happening on the deeper level. And so once I got myself aligned with what was real, like put the mirror to the face, call myself to the table, what I was craving naturally started to lean towards foods that were healthy for me, foods that were fueling my body and nourishing my mind. So that sort of came hand in hand. Again, once I figured this out, did it all start to happen linearly in a line? No, it went like this, okay? It was all over the place. But I knew every time I took steps back, I chose to not shame, but to learn and to love myself into healing. And then the last thing that I have on my list is, remember how I was saying that sometimes your negative self-talk was all that was there, that was kind of all you knew, that was all that was happening, and that's why I would numb myself with food or numb myself with TV just to detach from that, disconnect from that. So number 6 was I filled my mind with positive self-talk. How did I do that? Because those thoughts were not necessarily being generated by my own self at that point. I was not very strong in telling myself, like, you can do this, blah, 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 whatever. So I chose to positively brainwash myself with any positivity podcast, any audiobook that was instilling, it had to be audio. I had to hear it because I needed to hear that person say statements that were affirming and strong and empowering. And that sort of I allowed that to take the place of my own negative thoughts about myself. So I was sort of feeding myself through my eyes, through my ears, through podcasts, through audiobooks, through YouTube videos, anything like that. I almost did not allow it to be silent around me if I was alone. Whether I was in my car or I was on the subway or I was home, I purposely put on something like that so that the negative thoughts would not have space to overwhelm me and just like flood. Because when it got quiet, did all of my fears and thoughts and bad habits and negative thoughts and whatnot come back. So there was a time where I was forcing positivity into my brain, and it made me feel better. It worked. It really, really helped me. That being said, looking back, I know that there needed to be some moments of silence, of quiet, for me to sit with myself and acknowledge what I was feeling, because just having the positive just completely override the negative doesn't necessarily allow you to deal with the negative, but it did allow me to get to a place where I felt a little bit more confident, a little bit more positive that I could handle dealing with this. So it was sort of like an antidepressant tool, just like movement was an antidepressant tool to get me to a slightly better, a slightly lighter, a slightly more grounded place where I could then make better choices and where I could then feel a little bit more capable of doing that deeper work, which was scary as hell. But if I felt grounded and if I felt a little bit stronger, a little bit more belief in myself, it was going into working on my stuff. So it was a very holistic thing. Like I said before, there were other things that I used that I did not include on this list because this video would have just been way too long. I mean, just to give you like a quick idea, some of those other things were talking to a professional. I went to self-development workshop. I stopped drinking alcohol. So these are things I'll get to in another video. I just didn't want to make this a million years long. But if that's something you would be interested in hearing more about, please comment below specifically what it is that you would like to know more about. So on that note, look, I am not a psychologist, a psychiatrist. I said before, I'm a functional nutrition dietitian. I am a fitness specialist, a coach, and I am someone who wants to help others figure out how to overcome this and not feel like they're alone while they're doing it. So all of my programs, from the Warrior Evolution to the one-on-one coaching, even if you work with me in person, have elements of this and are all founded in the fact that movement helps improve our mental health and well-being. So this is what my personal experience was. This is what worked for me. If anything in this video feels like something you want to try on and see if it helps you, that's what it's here for. If you can relate to this, number one, I wish you all the love and the strength in the world, because this is one of the hardest things to deal with. And the evil of the disease, the thing that's messed up even more, is that it convinces you that you can get better. It convinces you that you will never be able to feel any different than you do right in this dark moment. And it takes away any energy that you may want to expend to figuring that out. It's really awful. And if you are struggling right now with this, I just want to say I love you. You are a strong warrior, even if you don't always believe it. And I know that you have somewhere inside you untapped strength, untapped capability of showing up for yourself, of helping yourself and healing yourself through this. And maybe that's something that's really hard to believe and even accept right now, but I am believing it for you because I had someone believe it for me before I believed it for myself. It's really hard. It's so hard. You're going to be fighting yourself every single day, which is why I felt like I was a warrior and why I called my program the Warrior Evolution, because you feel like you're battling for yourself every single day. You are fighting yourself for yourself every single day. You are fighting for that purpose, for that vision of yourself that is strong and happy and connected and loving and joyous and confident and empowered, and does all these things that you know that you in your heart you want to be able to do, because she's out there or he's out there. And you can have her again. You can be her again. You can be him again. And yeah, I believe it for you. If you need someone to hold that space and that belief for you right now while you are figuring out how to create that for yourself, man, I get it. And I am here for you for that. If you're interested in working with me directly, there is information down below, or you can click some of these links and they'll take you to the right places. I always do a complimentary call with anyone who's interested in working with me to see where you're at, to see if we're a good fit before we know what the next steps are. And we'll figure out a strategy together of what your next steps would be into overcoming whatever your struggles are. So you can check that out if that's something you're interested in. So warrior, this brings us to the end of this video. I hope that you made it to the end, and if you did, thank you so much for taking the time to watch it. I wish you all the love and strength in the world, and this is what I use to close out my warrior team workout videos, and I'm going to use it to close it out here because you deserve to hear it too. So this is how we do it. So I ask, who are you, warrior? And then we say together out loud, I am strong, I am powerful, I am a warrior, and I am ready for what's next. So here we go. Who are you, warrior? I am strong, I am powerful, I am a warrior, and I am ready for what's next. See you soon.